Hey everyone, welcome back to the History Channel. Today, we re-diving into a topic that's been simmering for years, and now seems to be reaching a boiling point. The tense relationship between the United States and Venezuela. It's a direct conflict on the horizon. Let's unpack the complex history, the current flashpoints, and what could happen next. To really understand where we are now, we have to look back. For decades, the US and Venezuela had a relationship primarily built on oil. Venezuela, with some of the world's largest proven oil reserves, was a major supplier to the American market. But things started to change dramatically with the rise of Hugo Chavez in 1999. His Bolivarian Revolution brought in socialist policies, nationalized key industries, including those owned by American companies, and he became a vocal, often fiery critic of US foreign policy. This set the stage for a new era of hostility. After Chavez's death, his successor, Nicolas Maduro, inherited a country already facing economic challenges. But a collapse in oil prices in the mid-2010s sent the Venezuelan economy into a catastrophic spiral. We're talking about hyperinflation that made the currency virtually worthless, widespread shortages of food and medicine, and a mass exodus of millions of Venezuelans fleeing the crisis. This humanitarian and economic disaster is where the US stance really hardened. The US, along with many other Western nations, accused the Maduro government of human rights abuses, corruption, and undermining democracy. A key turning point was the 2018 presidential election. Many international observers, including the US, deemed it fraudulent. In response, they refused to recognize Maduro as the legitimate president. Instead, in early 2019, the United States threw its full support behind Juan Guaido, the leader of the opposition-controlled National Assembly. Citing the Venezuelan Constitution, Guaido declared himself interim president, and dozens of countries followed the US in recognizing him. This was a direct challenge to Maduro's power and marked a significant escalation. The US implemented crippling economic sanctions aimed at cutting off the Maduro regime's revenue streams, particularly from oil. The idea was to apply maximum pressure to force Maduro out and pave the way for a democratic transition. But here's the thing: Maduro didn't fall. Despite the immense pressure, he managed to hold on to power. How? A few key reasons. First, the loyalty of the Venezuelan military. The top brass has remained firmly behind him, in part because they control key sectors of the economy and fear losing power and facing prosecution if the government changes. Second, international support. Maduro found crucial lifelines from countries like Russia, China, and Cuba. They provided financial loans, military equipment, and diplomatic cover, effectively counterbalancing the US pressure campaign. This created a stalemate. The maximum pressure strategy didn't achieve its primary goal of ousting Maduro and the sanctions while hurting the regime. also deepened the suffering of the Venezuelan people. This has led to a debate within Washington about whether the strategy was effective or if it just entrenched Maduro further. So, where does that leave us today? The situation is incredibly fragile. One of the biggest flashpoints is the ongoing territorial dispute between Venezuela and its neighbor, Guyana. Venezuela has long claimed a massive oil-rich region called the Essequibo. Recently, huge offshore oil discoveries have been made in this area, with major U.S. companies like ExxonMobil leading the exploration. Maduro's government has become much more aggressive in its claims, even holding a referendum on annexing the territory. This has put the U.S. in a tricky position. It has strong economic interests tied to Guyana's stability and has any move by Venezuela against Guyana could be seen as a direct threat to U.S. interests, potentially drawing a military response. Think about it. A conflict over resources involving a U.S.-backed nation and a U.S. adversary. The ingredients for a proxy-turned direct conflict are all there. Another major factor is the internal politics of both countries. In the U.S., policy towards Venezuela can be a hot-button issue, especially in election years. A perceived soft or failed policy can be used as a political weapon. For Maduro, ramping up nationalist rhetoric and creating an external enemy can be a useful tool to distract from the domestic crisis and rally support. It's a classic political playbook, but a dangerous one. So, what would a U.S. military intervention actually look like? Most experts agree that a full-scale invasion is highly unlikely. It would be incredibly costly, both in terms of lives and resources, and would likely result in a prolonged and messy guerrilla war. The U.S. has little appetite for another forever war, especially in its own hemisphere. A more plausible scenario would involve limited military actions. This could mean a naval blockade to enforce sanctions, targeted airstrikes against military assets, or special operations missions. The goal wouldn't be to occupy the country, but to degrade Maduro's military capabilities and force him to the negotiating table, or perhaps even trigger a coup from within his own ranks. However, even these limited options carry immense risks. Any direct U.S. military action would be condemned by many in Latin America, potentially damaging regional relationships. It would also invite a response from Venezuela's allies, like Russia, which could further escalate the situation into a broader geopolitical showdown. A miscalculation by either side, skirmish in the waters off Guyana, for example, could spiral out of control very quickly. Right now, the path forward seems to be a tightrope walk between diplomacy and deterrence. There have been some recent thaws, with the U.S. easing some sanctions in exchange for promises of fairer elections from the Maduro government. But these agreements are fragile. The fundamental conflict remains. The U.S. and its allies want a democratic transition, while Maduro and his supporters are determined to hold on to power at all costs. The countdown to a potential conflict isn't necessarily a ticking clock with a clear 0 hour. It's more like a barometer measuring rising pressure. The dispute with Guyana, the continued economic desperation, and the unpredictable nature of domestic politics in both nations are all pushing that pressure higher. While diplomacy is still the preferred path, the pieces for a confrontation are undeniably in place. The world is watching, hoping that a peaceful solution can be found before this long simmering standoff boils over into open conflict. What do you think? Is a direct conflict inevitable, or can diplomacy prevail? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you found this breakdown helpful, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into global affairs. We'll see you in the next one.